A bid to ease overcrowding on MTR trains. The condition of Mingbao's former chief editor improves. And turmoil in Crimea amid Ukraine's political crisis.
Good evening. The MTR Corporation has come up with ways to try to ease overcrowding on board its trains. This follows claims that the system may be reaching capacity. Vicky Kung has our top story tonight.
Lawmakers today raised concerns about overcrowding trains and the MTR system reaching capacity. This follows a change in the maximum capacity quota from 6 passengers per square meter to 4. The Transport and Housing Bureau said the growing use of mobile gadgets by passengers was one reason why they need more room. The change means some lines have reached or are about to reach capacity. About 5.2 million trips are taken on the MTR on a normal weekday. Overcrowded train compartments are common during peak hours. The company is now coming up with ways to address the problem before new railways like the Shotton Central Link begin operating in 2018.
Our engineers will explore the possibility of replacing a few train seats with bump seats to create more multi-purpose areas. But this would not be done on a large-scale manner. And in the meantime, we will look at different incentives to encourage passengers to travel before the morning peak period.
But an early bird scheme won't be unveiled anytime soon. The MTR Corporation says it needs time to study all the issues involved. Still, the company will increase frequency on the Chengquan-O line during the morning rush hour. There are also plans to raise the number of carriages on certain trains. And the railway giant today apologized over a recent spate of incidents.
First, let me sincerely apologize again to all of our passengers and to the members here who were affected by the rail service disruptions over the past several weeks. The most important weakness, which became apparent through a review of the East Rail incidents, is the sourcing of materials and the related quality assurance process.
Faulty insulators have been blamed. The MTR Corporation says it has now replaced all the problematic insulators that it previously failed to screen out. Vicky Kung, TVB News.
The condition of the former chief editor of Mingbao, Kevin Lau, has improved. It was upgraded today from critical to serious. And the man who was attacked 2 days ago told friends who visited him at the hospital that Hong Kong people should protect press freedom. Joao De Silva reports.
Mingbao's former chief editor Kevin Lau is still at Eastern Hospital's intensive care unit, where friends and relatives have been visiting him. Those who went there today were impressed with his recovery.
Well, I think his condition is much better than I anticipated. He was able to converse freely with me. In fact, the very first thing that he said was that Hong Kong people should stand up for press freedom.
Liberal Party legislator James Tian said Lau is still in pain and has difficulty moving his legs, but that he's slowly recovering. While inside, Kevin Lau's condition continues to improve. Outside, there's a growing sense that this attack was not just on him, but on press freedom itself.
The core value of our industry is now facing the greatest challenge and is subject to the greatest suppression. If we remain silent today, we'll be silenced tomorrow.
This attack is obvious in that it's related to his work, and that's the suspicion in the community as well. We have to tell the evil force that Hong Kong people will not be gagged.
But while most members at the LegCo House Committee support a motion condemning the attack, others don't think its wording should mention press freedom.
What we need to condemn is the bloody attack. And of course, we want to find out exactly the reason for the attack. Only then would that be a fair way to deal with the matter.
And ahead of an anti-violence protest scheduled for this Sunday, the Hong Kong Journalists Association and other media representatives were today collecting signatures in Causeway Bay for a petition pressing the police to quickly bring the culprits to justice. Joao De Silva, TVB News.
An annual report from the U.S. State Department on human rights around the world has identified problems relating to press freedom in Hong Kong. The report also points out the difficulties for Hong Kong people when it comes to political participation. Alan Booknia has that story.
The report was released in Washington by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. While saying that the Hong Kong government generally respects freedom of speech and freedom of the press, it cites media censorship, referring to editors deferring to the perceived concerns of publishers regarding their business interests. The U.S. report also points to Hong Kong's lack of a plan to scrap functional constituency seats in the legislature. It says Hong Kong's voting process ensures pro-business representatives and government allies remain the majority. The report also cites what it describes as the police's arbitrary arrests and detention of protesters and aggressive tactics hampering the freedom of assembly. On China, the report does note some progress, citing the country's relaxation of its one-child policy. But it's strongly critical of the government's tightening of restrictions of basic freedoms, noting the continued crackdown on rights activists and freedom of expression. China responded with a report of its own, saying that while the U.S. identified rights abuses in almost 200 countries, it conveniently avoided mentioning its own problems. The Chinese report cites drone attacks in countries such as Yemen and Pakistan that kill innocent civilians, and rampant gun violence in the U.S. The Beijing report also slams the U.S. surveillance program, calling it a blatant violation of international law. Overall, Beijing says Washington is exercising double standards when it comes to human rights. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
In yet another story relating to press freedom, groups of journalists and their supporters protested against the detention of 4 Al Jazeera staff in Egypt. The demonstrations were held in more than 30 countries, including the United States and Brazil. The 4 journalists being held are among 20 defendants being tried on charges of belonging to and aiding a terrorist organization for their coverage of the Muslim Brotherhood. Last week, they pleaded not guilty. Al Jazeera says reporters were just doing their jobs.
Pro-Russian forces appear to be tightening their grip on the strategic Crimea region of Ukraine after taking control of key airports and buildings there. James Aiken has the latest on the rising threats to Ukrainian unity.
Armed men in unmarked military uniforms patrol the airport in the regional capital of Ukraine's strategic Crimea region. Flights have been arriving and departing as usual, and no violence has been reported. We are here to ensure general order. We don't want radicals coming on planes from Kiev to make trouble, says a man named Vladimir. He says he belongs to a group that calls itself the People's Militia of Crimea. But this passenger named Oleg says he's never heard of the People's Militia of Crimea. I'm very worried, but what can I do at the moment, he says. Oleg isn't the only one worried. Ukraine's Interior Ministry says the armed men represent the Russian Federation. There are also claims the Russian military is blocking another airport near a Russian naval base in what's being described as a military invasion and occupation. Moscow is denying any involvement, but did say it has stepped up measures by its anti-terror units to protect areas where parts of its fleet are based, given what it calls an unstable situation. Russia is also continuing unscheduled military drills just over Ukraine's border. In response, new Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk said the country will remain united and will guarantee the safety of people in Crimea. Meanwhile, Washington is staying on its message of restraint in its communications with Russia.
I think it's very important to underscore that Foreign Minister Lavrov relayed to me directly from President Putin that Russia will respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And we believe that everybody now needs to step back and avoid any kind of provocations.
But as pro-Russian rallies gather steam in Crimea, Ukraine's parliament has passed a motion asking the UN Security Council to address the country's political turmoil. James Aiken, TVB News.
A demonstration in Venezuela's capital that started peacefully yesterday ended with government security forces firing tear gas at protesters. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered in Caracas to demand an end to the government crackdown on protests and the release of those jailed in recent weeks. When some of the protesters later moved towards a major highway to block traffic, security forces began to fire tear gas. On Wednesday, President Nicolas Maduro held a peace conference at the presidential palace aimed at ending the violence. What began as student-led demonstrations earlier this month in several cities have claimed at least 16 lives. Government opponents are protesting against inflation, crime, and the shortages of many basic foods and goods.
Britain's spy agency GCHQ intercepted millions of images of people's webcam chats and stored still images of them, including sexually explicit ones. That's according to The Guardian newspaper. It's just the latest in the long list of revelations from former U.S. intelligence contractor Edward Snowden, who remains in Russia on temporary asylum. The newspaper says GCHQ has been scooping up the sensitive images by intercepting video chats, such as the kind offered by Yahoo Messenger. Yahoo said it was unaware of such snooping, and it said if confirmed, it would represent a whole new level of violation of our users' privacy.
South Korea and Japan are playing down North Korea's firing of 4 Scud missiles off its east coast yesterday. South Korea's defense ministry confirmed today that an analysis of their speed and trajectory confirmed they were short-range Scuds, possibly launched as a protest to ongoing U.S.-South Korean military drills. A ministry spokesman said he didn't expect the tests to raise tensions because Pyongyang routinely tests short-range missiles. In Tokyo, a government spokesman said the missile tests did not change Japan's national security situation.
Tragedy today in eastern Thailand. 15 people, including 13 children, were killed when a bus carrying them crashed into a truck. 2 teachers also died. More than 30 others were injured. The bus was carrying about 60 schoolgirls for a day trip in Pattaya. It went out of control while traveling downhill and slammed into a truck in front of it. The bus then slipped off the shoulder of the road. Police say the brakes might have failed or the driver might have dozed off.
And still to come in our news tonight. Li Ka-shing speaks out against Occupy Central. The latest in Carson Yeung's money laundering trial, and how a 3-year-old American girl saves her father's life.